Dana is CNN's chief political correspondent and co-anchor of State of the Union, the network's Sunday morning newsmaker show. She covers campaigns in Congress and regularly serves as a moderator for CNN's political town hall specials and presidential debates. And just last week, CNN announced that Dana will soon anchor the daily afternoon show, Inside Politics. Mazel tov, Dana. Congratulations. And we're really glad to have you with us. And this is kind of a treat because Dana has interviewed me. She'll often call me, but now I get to do the talking and she's on the hot seat. So that's sort of fun. But the topic we're going to talk about today is actually quite serious. So you recently returned from a trip to Auschwitz with Wolf Blitzer, commemorating the 80th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. Can you share not just your impressions for the trip, but how it came about? Like, what was the thought process? And then sort of what were some of your takeaways?
About last week, or maybe it was the week before last.
I think 2 weeks ago, yeah.
2 weeks ago. The answer to how it happened was my big boss, the biggest boss that I have, David Zaslav, who is the chairman of Warner Brothers Discovery. He decided that he was going to join with two friends of his, Robert Kraft, who is the owner of the New England Patriots, and Ari Emanuel, who is the head of Endeavor.
Those are some friends.
They all had their own planes. I did not. That they were going to do a delegation together for the March of the Living and for the 80th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And as part of that, they decided that they would each take people with them. And so he called Wolf and he called me and said, "Do you want to come?" And I said, "Yes, I would love to come." And he said, "Look, I want you to experience it. I want you to really find meaning in what you do there." And I certainly did. He said, "But you know, this is also a way for us to use our platforms to shine a light on not just what happened in the past, but make never again mean something. Yeah. That it's about what's going on right now." And so we were able to do that in a really profound way. And I wasn't sure, frankly, what to expect. Mm-hmm. And a lot of what we were able to report on happened organically, particularly when we were at Auschwitz. And we can talk about that if you want. But I feel so lucky to work in a place, A, that thought that that was an important trip to take, but B, put so many resources and time on our platforms to talk about these issues.
Yeah, I mean, that's a consequential decision.
Yeah.
Send two of your most high-profile anchors across the world to cover an event that happened, 70 some odd years ago. So talk to us about what it felt like to be there and the commitment of the network.
It felt heavy. I had never, have you been to?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd never been to Auschwitz. My great-grandparents were murdered there. My great aunt was there, but then we believe she died on a death march. But for various reasons, I didn't feel, I felt a pull to see it, but I just kind of didn't really want to. Part of me didn't want to, but then it fell in my lap and I said, of course I'll go. And I'm so glad I did. Yeah. And I have to say that, it was kind of weird because we were there again to observe, to feel, to be a part of this, but also we were working, so there were cameras on us but the most unbelievable moment that was not captured by the cameras, but I'll tell you what happened was, so Wolf and I were doing sort of our thing with the camera, telling each other stories, and then we met up with the group who were walking around with an expert guide. Mm-hmm. We met up with them right outside the gas chamber at Auschwitz, Auschwitz I, they call it. And Wolf started telling the guide about his family. His father actually is from the town of Auschwitz.
Wow.
And that both of his parents were survivors. Both of them were in slave labor camps, but that his father's parents, Wolf's grandparents, died at Auschwitz. They were taken. And so he was telling the information about the dates and about their ages, and the guide said, and we were standing here and the gas chamber was like right here. And the guide said, oh, your grandparents died right there in that gas chamber.
Wow.
And it was like, I mean, it was so incredibly heavy because it's one thing to hear that information. You know, so many of us have gotten information about our family and our ancestors that maybe we didn't have before, but to have it standing right there on this, I don't even know, you don't even call it hallowed ground. You just, this hellscape basically is where we were, was unbelievable. And I was able to bring my brother, Wolf brought his wife, Lynn. And then I started asking the guide about my family. They were Hungarian. And he said, oh, they came in 1944. I said, exactly. What town? Košice. Oh, they didn't make it here. They were over at Birkenau, and they just, in their 50s, they probably didn't even last an hour. They probably got right off the train and were killed.
Wow.
And my brother started crying. Everybody, it was so powerful to be there and to learn about it. And then again, to go into that gas chamber with Wolf and to experience that this wasn't our piece, him standing in this place that he had just learned moments earlier was where his grandparents were murdered.
That's heavy.
It was super heavy and so important.
Right.
And as he said in the piece, it's so important for a lot of reasons, but one of them is that the Holocaust denialism is real and it's on the rise, as we know a lot because of your work. And he said, like, this is so important. This is not fake. This happened. We're here. This is real.
Well, it's interesting because I think when a lot of us, and not everyone in this audience is Jewish, when a lot of us who are Jewish see you, Dana, we know you're sort of, member of the tribe. Mm-hmm. And I think we know Wolf, but I don't know that most audiences know that. I'm not sure it's obvious to the general public. So how does being Jewish, affect the way that you tell these stories in a time of rising anti-Semitism?
It's such a good question because I'm guessing that if I were doing my job 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I might have told that story in a more detached way.
Uh-huh.
In a, like, this is what happened, just the facts. And now I think both Wolf and I feel compelled to do it in a more personal way. Mm-hmm. In order to humanize and make the reality of the situation hit home in a more poignant and powerful way. I don't know if that worked, but, and we didn't even talk about it.
Right.
It was just kind of an understood thing that this is what each of us wanted to do.
Wow. Well, it's interesting because I think anti-Semitism is really a conspiracy theory about how the world works. And we're living in an age when conspiracy theories are the coin of the realm. And frankly, disinformation seems everywhere. How hard is it for you to do your job as a journalist in an environment where it seems like disinformation, misinformation are rampant? How does that change the work for you?
It's really hard.
Yeah.
It is like living in an alternate universe sometimes. It makes the work more important. I don't know that any of us has cracked the code quite yet of convincing those who have been convinced that what we report, what you report with your data is real. And so far, the only thing that we have just decided that we have to keep doing is trying.
Right. Yeah.
And to bring people in who are, like you said, there are people in this room who aren't Jewish. One of the things that was amazing about this trip is that Robert Kraft brought the rapper and hip hop artist Meek Mill with him. They had formed a relationship around criminal justice issues. And I mean, this is a guy who grew up in the inner city in Philadelphia. He said, you don't even know the way I grew up. Mm-hmm. And he said that he put everything that he put pictures and information on his social media. Mm-hmm. And he said, I'm going to take this back to my community.
Yeah.
And how important is that? Mm-hmm. Particularly at a time when other rappers are approaching this in a very dangerous way.
Well, I think that's sort of understating it, right? I mean, but that, makes me think about this issue of anti-Semitism. I mean, we've tracked how extremists have targeted and trolled Jewish journalists in particular, right, with anti-Semitism. Have you encountered that?
Not like that. Not like Julia Yaffe, for example.
Julia Yaffe, Jake Tapper,
Yeah.
Ben Shapiro.
Yep.
I think Wolf would agree. We've seen a lot of it. What about you?
A little bit. So back in 2012, I believe it was, and social media was just becoming like really potent. And I was covering the Republican primary race. And I said something that I was just reporting on something that Rand Paul's father, had said or not said. It was, to me, it was like super innocuous, and it had absolutely nothing to do with religion. And it was misinterpreted by his people and by supporters of his. It wasn't him or his campaign, just supporters of his. And they started trolling me. They made a Twitter handle with my maiden name, Dana Schwartz, with the Israeli flag behind my face.
Yeah.
And, we were able to get it taken down. Probably couldn't do that
Probably not today.
But that was honestly the only time that I know of that I experienced that. It was weird, especially since it had absolutely my Judaism had zero to do with whatever it was that his supporters were mad about.
Well, look, I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Is like your Judaism has very little to do with the way we do our jobs, the way we lead our lives. These are the values, but for the anti-Semite, for the bigot, that's the only way that they see you.
Precisely.
Right? Not as a human being, but as something else, and that is the problem. So, but it makes me think, look, I'm going to use the opportunity, and maybe this will be the last question because I'm mindful of time. You mentioned 2012. We're heading to 2024 in a race. Give us, if you will, some of your thoughts as we look ahead to this election cycle, what role you think maybe disinformation, misinformation will play, how you see things playing out in terms of the candidates. They seem to be the race seems to be taking shape now in many ways.
It does. I mean, it's early. Remember in 2016, we thought Scott Walker was going to be the nominee.
Scott Walker.
He didn't even make it to the Iowa caucuses.
Now?
So I would just say, I definitely am so out of the prediction business after 2016, but I wasn't really in it, but I'm really out of it now. But disinformation is because of the way that that news sites have been siloed, the way that people consume information is through an echo chamber. But it's also so much more nefarious now because it's not just that. It's not just actual humans doing things in a way that are dangerous. It's AI, the bots that we have seen over the past few cycles.
Yeah.
That is something that we all have to be mindful of. I mean, you can see a time where they would make a deep fake of Jonathan Greenblatt saying something that you would never, ever say.
I think we've seen that actually already.
Really? Is that true?
So. You could ask Scheinberg, but I think we've already seen that.
I mean, it's really scary because you actually can't even believe what you're seeing and hearing.
Yeah.
You can't believe your eyes and your ears.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, look, Dana, thank you for your grace. Thank you for your guts. Thank you for being there for our community and for the country. We're all rooting for you and just appreciate you being here with us this afternoon.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
You're a sweetheart. Now, it is my great honor and I take tremendous pleasure in welcoming the U.S. Special Envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism, Ambassador Deborah Lipstadt. Wait with the music. Wait with the music. So what I want to do now is draw from a piece that I wrote to honor Ambassador Lipstadt with a short essay that was included in the latest edition of the Time 100. If you don't know, Ambassador Lipstadt was one of Time's 100 most important people of the year. Here's what I wrote, which I think is the most appropriate introduction. And again, I had the honor of writing the essay for her. In the book of Proverbs, there's a hymn that speaks of a woman of valor, Eshet Chayil in Hebrew, one who is strong and righteous and who also provides a safe home where Jewish values and traditions may thrive. As U.S. Special Envoy, Ambassador Lipstadt exemplifies this image, tirelessly working to protect Jewish communities and to build a world where all are safe and protected. A distinguished scholar, Ambassador Lipstadt courageously has taken on anti-Semitism on campus, in the courts, and in the halls of power. Now she is battling the oldest hatred at a moment when anti-Jewish hate has surged to record levels in the United States and around the world. Ambassador Lipstadt has aptly noted that anti-Semitism may start with the Jews, but it never ends with the Jews. And so her work, fearlessly calling on the international community to ensure that Jews everywhere can live safely and practice their faith freely, is critical, not only for Jewish people, but also for ensuring a society free of bigotry and intolerance for all people. Please join me in welcoming my friend, the very distinguished Ambassador Deborah Lipstadt.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan, for that gracious introduction, and also for the kind words in amongst the Time 100. I never expected to be in such a group, and it really was quite amazing. I was just telling people backstage that I was standing after having gone across the red carpet with another winner, because we had little badges, and watching Judy Blume, watching Steven Spielberg, and this one. And the guy asked me, what do you do? And I told him, he said, oh, that's really impressive. That's really important. He said, I'm Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. When I come to Washington, can I visit you? I said, of course. And what did you do? And he said, oh, I'm head of a team that stopped an asteroid from going into Earth. So I said, well, the rest of us can go home now. It's a pleasure being here. Even though I deal with an issue which is of great concern to all of us in this room, probably concern to no group more so than those people in this room. Earlier this year, at the end of January, I was in Berlin, having come from spending a day in Auschwitz on Holocaust Remembrance Day. I was traveling with the second gentleman, Doug Emhoff. And we were in Berlin, and I was in various meetings. He was in other meetings. But that night at dinner, we were at the home of Ambassador Amy Gutmann, and a University of Pennsylvania graduates here, your former president, herself the child of a Holocaust survivor, a refugee from Germany. And when it came time for me to give my remarks, I noted that it was January 30th. Precisely the day on which, in 1933, Hitler had come to power. And that morning, I had convened a meeting, which was also attended by Mr. Emhoff, of all the special envoys in other parts of Europe who were dealing with a similar portfolio: Austria, Romania, the European Union, Germany, Argentina, OAS, Organization of American States, and so many others. And I said, we met in the place called the Topography of Terror. If you've ever visited Berlin, I'm sure you've been there. Very, very powerful museum, which is adjacent to where the SS, the Gestapo, and the SS and the Gestapo had their headquarters. And on one hand, the fact that we were there was a testament to the fact that the Nazis the Germans, the Third Reich, had not succeeded. They had succeeded in murdering 1 out of every 3 Jews alive on the face of the earth, but we were there, and we were there as government representatives, which was quite striking. On the other hand, the fact that we needed to be there was a sobering reminder that the problem is not over. I'm not going to spend a minute citing statistics to you, because the statistics I would cite, most of which would come from the ADL. So there's a little bit of tautological, you know the news is not good. Or as my family likes to say, Deborah works in a growth industry. And, we can laugh about it, but, it's that Jewish kind of humor. You know what a Jewish telegram is. Start worrying, details follow. But I think we have to recognize a number of things. First of all, I'm often asked, with great concern by people, and I was asked this before I became ambassador, before the president nominated me in the Senate after some delay, you may have heard about it, confirmed me unanimously. And now, since then, I'm asked by people, is this 1938 redux? Or is this 1933 redux? Are we entering the 30s? And many questions I can't answer unequivocally. But that question I can answer unequivocally, and the answer is no. And there is a striking difference between then and now. And even as we fight this battle, we should keep that in mind. I am, as I mentioned ago, nominated by the president, confirmed by the Senate. It's the highest rank that you can reach. We have representatives also, as I managed, or I have colleagues or counterparts in 16 or 17 other countries, asked by their governments, Italy, Belgium, Germany, Croatia, Organization of American States, the EU representing 27 countries, et cetera, dealing with this issue. And let's remember that in the 1930s, this animus was being projected and compelled by governments, whether it was governments in Germany or in Poland, other countries. This was government sponsored. It doesn't mean that there wasn't a public that went along with it, but it was coming from the top. Today, it's a different story. Today, the governmental leaders recognize the danger that anti-Semitism poses. And I think that's a significant factor. And the fact that our Congress raised this position that I hold, the office that I hold, to a level of an ambassador, and they did it before I was nominated, so it's nothing to do with me, it's troublesome because they felt it was necessary. But the fact that they were able to do that and get that confirmed with no significant opposition is also quite striking. Imagine if there had been someone with my status and my position in the State Department in 1938 after Kristallnacht, when Jews were desperate for some place to go. Imagine if there had been someone there when the SS St. Louis was off the coast of Miami being turned away by the Coast Guard. Imagine in 1942 when trains were rolling across Europe and Jews knew what was coming. Or in 1944 when the Nazis, knowing they were going to lose, the Soviets were coming from the east and they knew there was going to be a landing from the west in the not too distant future, and they were losing on all fronts, still managed to deport and murder over 400,000, about 26,000 Hungarian Jews. They deported 500,000 and murdered over 400,000 of them. Imagine in 1944, when we had confirmation of the existence of gas chambers at Auschwitz, and people were begging the United States to bomb the gas chambers. Yes, it would have taken the lives of people in the camps, but those people in the camps were hoping, as the bombers flew over to bomb other locales near Auschwitz, that they would drop a bomb there to send the message. There would have been someone to say, this cannot stand. This shall not stand. So that is a major difference and something that should give us, as we say in Hebrew, chizuk, strength. It should strengthen us. It should give us confidence or fortitude that we're not out there alone. But let me add another element. And again, on some level, to paraphrase the Bard, or to borrow from the Bard, from Shakespeare, it's bringing coals to Newcastle to tell a group such as yourself. But as good as government representatives can be, as hard as I work, and I thought being a professor was hard, piece of cake, compared to this, and as assiduously as I fight this issue. And we're hoping to complete fairly soon a domestic plan, as was mentioned earlier, a strategy for fighting anti-Semitism. It won't be sufficient unless it is accompanied by the voices of the American public and the public in every other country. Government can only do so much. We need other people, good people, to stand up and speak out. And that includes you. I mean, here I am saying to you, the most devoted members of ADL who are here doing this work. But whether you hear it at the gym, in the post office, some of us still go to the post office, wherever you go, I don't know, the supermarket that we still go to, in a meeting, on the carpool line, over a game of bridge, I don't know where and when, someone makes a crack, someone says something, call them out. If they say it innocently, educate them. If you think it's otherwise, take them on. That doesn't mean you have to punch them in the face, but you have to fight and fight smartly. We have to make it clear that it's not acceptable. I hear too often from people in different realms in media, especially when I'm being interviewed, you know, when the cameras are off, my child experienced this or experienced that. That's the normalization of anti-Semitism. And no government can stop that. That calls for good people everywhere saying, this shall not stand. This cannot stand. Enough is enough. It may start with the Jews, but it never ends with the Jews. And one last point. Remind people, this is not just about protecting the welfare of Jews. If it were that alone would be sufficient. If you have a vulnerable community, and I know you'll be gathering with other vulnerable communities on Tuesday for a rally, a vulnerable group in your midst, it's the government's job, it's the administration's job to protect them. But anti-Semitism is the canary in the coal mine of democracy. I repeat that. Anti-Semitism is the canary in the coal mine of democracy. If you value democracy, you must fight anti-Semitism. The anti-Semite believes Jews control everything: banks, judiciary, police, governments, media. They believe democracy is a sham. If you value the democracy in which you live, then you will fight anti-Semitism. If not now, when? Thank you very much.
6 years ago, when I was wrapping up my time in the Glass Leadership Institute and attending my first National Leadership Conference here in Washington, D.C., I had no idea what my ADL path would look like, where I would focus my time and energy, or what I would do to fight the battle against hate, bigotry, extremism, discrimination, and anti-Semitism. I remember listening to the dynamic speakers, the horrific tales of actions taken against the individuals and communities, and the ADL's thoughtful and deliberate responses. But I couldn't help but think that much of what I was hearing was reactive. I wanted my ADL experience to be focused on combating hate, discrimination, extremism, and anti-Semitism before it happened, to change the hearts and minds of the next generation, because I firmly believe that the long-term success of the ADL is tied directly to educating individuals before they have a chance to embrace hate and extremism. And then I discovered ADL education. ADL education is on the front lines of the war against hate every single day. We teach kindergartners about the importance of words, and we use their impact and how it impacts others. We educate elementary schoolers to embrace differences rather than alienate those unlike ourselves. We counsel middle schoolers to be upstanders against bullies rather than bystanders. And we teach high schoolers about fostering no place for hate communities that serve as a safe space regardless of one's race, religion, gender, or preferences. Education continues throughout a lifetime. We visit colleges and universities and employers to spread the message of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We train police officers to recognize their implicit biases so that they're better prepared to work in their communities. And we host discussions with Holocaust survivors who share their stories so that we may never bear witness to the horrors ever again. So for those of you who were like me, trying to figure out, where do I fit into the ADL? Join me, join ADL education. Our job is daunting, it's monumental, it requires persistence and patience, but it is so worth the fight as we help to shape the hearts and minds of the next generation so that someday we can all live in a world without hate. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. I'm so beyond thrilled to be one of this year's recipients of the Daniel R. Ginsburg Leadership Award. When I started my journey with ADL years ago, I came to this summit as a GLI participant. I never could have imagined that one day I'd be on this stage accepting this award. It means the world to me. I'm so humbled to be even a small part of carrying on the incredible legacy of Daniel R. Ginsburg. He continues to inspire me and so many others. I'm grateful for the absolutely incredible Florida regional staff who have always been so enthusiastic about encouraging my leadership journey within this organization. I also want to mention how wonderfully supportive my husband has been of my ADL work. Every time I tell him about a new committee I want to co-chair, an event I want to host in our home, or yet another late evening ADL meeting I want to attend, he always smiles and supports me. As a matter of fact, he even flew out here from Florida to be with me while I accept my award. And of course, my parents, who never hesitate to watch my kids whenever I ask. Like many of you in this room, my work with ADL came to me out of a sense of urgency and determination to roll up my sleeves and do something. I couldn't sit by idly as anti-Semitism and hate in this country and beyond started to rear its ugly head ever more publicly and ever more often. My sense of urgency was magnified by the fact that I am a mother to 3 young children who stand to inherit this sordid environment if I don't act on their behalf. As we sit in this room today, I know we are all concerned about the direction we are headed. The seeming normalization of hate in today's society, as evidenced year after year in trends tracked annually by the ADL, is undeniable. Admittedly, it can sometimes feel like there is too much work to do. However, I find inspiration in the leadership of all of you sitting here in this room today, combined with the incredibly innovative work of the Anti-Defamation League. I find meaning in a quote by the famous Rebbe Menachem Mendel Schneerson, who said, "Remember that in a hall of perfect darkness, totally dark, if you light one small candle, its light will be seen from afar. Its precious light will be seen by everyone." It's heartwarming to stand in front of this room full of so many incredible leaders within this organization and many soon-to-be GLI grads who have yet to show us what they are also capable of doing, to see so many small candles flickering. I have hope that together we are going to continue to hone those small flickering candles into a massive flame as we work together to quell the darkness of anti-Semitism and hate. Thank you again to the League for selecting me as a recipient of this distinguished award. It's something I will always cherish.
Well, when they told me I was going to have to make remarks as part of this award process, I thought to myself, what do I say to a room of 500 people who agree with me about everything? What a joy it is to be back here in person after so many years away. To say the least, living through what we've all endured the last 3 years with the pandemic, where the entire world as we knew it was turned upside down, it really gives you an intense sense of gratitude for moments like this one. I'm so grateful to the ADL, to the Ginsburg family, and to Chairman Sachs for naming me as a 2023 Ginsburg Award recipient. I'm honored to be joining the ranks of young professionals throughout ADL now and in the past who've been recognized for their contributions to the organization, and to be honoring Danny Ginsburg's lifetime of commitment, his memory and his commitment, his devotion to the ADL and its values. I also want to thank David Goldenberg, our fearless Midwest Regional Director, Fran Krasnow, our devoted Midwest Regional Board Chair, for nominating me. You both set continually an example for all of us of what it means to be living a life of purpose, whether as a volunteer or as a staff member. I want to thank the lay leaders and the staff of ADL Midwest, who I get to work with and learn from every day, particularly the tireless Trent Spolstra, without whom this would have never happened. I am so proud of our group in the Midwest, and it's such a privilege to be a part of it. For me, ADL is deeply personal. The wedding band that I'm wearing today is my grandfather's. He was the only member of his immediate family to survive the Holocaust. And he survived through moments that reflect a profound sense of humanity during a time of unimaginable terror. So you see, my grandfather was actually taken to the Nazi concentration camp at Dachau and then released. And the reason he was released is because his mother went in the middle of the night to a childhood friend who had become a high-ranking SS officer in her hometown and begged for his life. She succeeded. And then my grandfather managed, after getting released, to make it to the United States because two circus performers in New York, Alex and Mitza, people he had never met and had no connection to, sponsored his visa. The lesson here is that in times of extraordinary struggle, there is still room for good. When we talk about echoes and reflections here at ADL, those aren't just a story, those aren't just words that we tell non-Jews to feel sorry for us. They're a series of real events that happened to real people, and they had real and lasting impact on our community and on all communities. Now, as the survivors of the Shoah start to fade into history, all of us, whether a direct descendant or not of a survivor, carry an enormous responsibility. As it was just said in the show that we watched, we have to make their sacrifice worth it. How do we do that? Two ways. First, we carry on the traditions for which those people gave their lives that have lasted millennia. The second, and even more importantly, is by building a world where that can never happen again to anyone of any kind, for any reason. As we will hear again and again over the next couple of days, we are living in a moment where the forces of hatred, ignorance, and intolerance are on the march in a way that they haven't been in a generation. Those same people that generation ago and 2 generations ago murdered innocents are rising. And again, Jews are not their only target. Like so many of you, I am here at ADL because ADL is on the front lines of responding to those forces. We need to be the voice that generations before us never had, so that any community under attack can look to us and our allies for safety. As the great civil rights icon John Lewis liked to say, all of us need to find a way to get in the way. We need to make good trouble, necessary trouble. And that's why I'm here. And that's why I imagine a lot of you are here as well. I'm honored today to accept the Ginsburg Award for my commitments to ADL thus far, and look at it not as an honor, but as a challenge to continue those commitments on to the future. And I'm ready and excited to get back to work with all of you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for this incredible recognition. I'd like to begin by thanking those who selected me for this award, the ADL Southwest Regional staff who nominated me, Dina, Margie, and Mark, and my husband Lawrence, who traveled to be with me here today. I would especially like to thank my uncle, former Southwest Regional Board Chair Alfie Meyerson, and 2 former Southwest Regional Board Chairs who also previously received this Ginsburg Award, my uncle, Jay Harburg, and my mom, Polly Robinson. I am a product of my family. My grandmother, Mallory Robinson, who should be watching from home if her computer cooperated today, was the first female board chair of the ADL Southwest region. While she often says that the involvement of her children and now her grandchildren in the work of ADL means that she must have failed somewhere along the way, I think quite the opposite. Our involvement is a testament to the solid foundation that she built that enables the ADL to do the work that it does today with authority, credibility, and perpetuity. Growing up Jewish in Texas is a unique experience. I was raised by parents who were not welcome on public school sports teams or in other social activities. Parents, not grandparents. They had to make conscientious choices to ensure that I grew up with a strong Jewish identity. It was ingrained in who I am that my community depends on me and my generation to keep pushing, to keep fighting, and to always prioritize the needs of our own community, and with that, the needs of others similar to us. As an 18-year-old, I had the opportunity to attend the March of the Living, a life-changing trip to Poland and Israel. I remember coming home and telling my parents that I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, but that I knew that I wanted to spend my life in the room where decisions were being made so that I could use my voice if and when it was needed. I am now in my 10th year as an assistant district attorney, where that voice has certainly come in handy. People often ask me, how do you reconcile your career, which you are extremely passionate about, with the activities in which you are involved? The answer to me is very simple. As a prosecutor, it is my foremost obligation not to seek a conviction, but to see that justice is done. This duty is perfectly in line with both the mission of the ADL and with the sense of responsibility to my community that has become an integral part of who I am. In just a few short months, my husband and I will welcome a second child into the world. When I think about what motivates me to keep doing this work, to keep fighting this fight, my answer is twofold. I am here to build off of the foundation that was laid by those who came before me in order to ensure a better world for my children and their generation, just as was done for me. I thank you again for this incredible honor, and I look forward to continuing to fight hate for good alongside the ADL for many years to come. Thank you.
Well, first of all, welcome to our summit.
It is great being here.
I so appreciate you joining us today.
Let me tell you, first of all, any invitation that I get from Jonathan, the answer is going to be yes. I have, and yeah, we can give a round of applause on that. I've adored this man and his leadership for a very, very long time. I'm thankful to not just call you a colleague in the work, but to call you a friend.
Yep.
And I'm really proud of you, and I'm really thankful for this organization and the work that you do.
Thanks.
So I'm humbled for the invitation, and I'm humbled to be your partner today, tomorrow, and beyond. Because
nice.
Together we're gonna win.
So, for those who don't know, Wes is a decorated veteran. He's a best-selling author. He's the former CEO of Robin Hood Foundation, an organization focused on poverty alleviation in New York City. And so he brings an understanding of the public sector and the military and the private sector to this role today. So talk to us a bit about your vision for Maryland. What does it mean to have a state that's free of hate and extremism? Share with us.
I knew coming in that the number one responsibility for any chief executive is making sure that everybody in your state can feel safe in their own homes, safe in their own communities, and safe in their own skin, right? And part of what that means is that, and part of what that means is we will create a Maryland where every single person in our state knows that they should never be harmed nor feel fearful about something that they are both not responsible for and B, that they should not be ashamed of. That every single Marylander should know that this is going to be a state that is going to protect them.
Bravo.
And it was one of the reasons why, as soon as we saw the data that came out, that ADL published, and I want to give a special shout out to Meredith. I'm not sure where she is. Who, by the way, I want to apologize because I called her like 10 o'clock at night. When I first saw this data, I called her and I said, listen, I didn't even want the day to cross over before giving you a phone call. To let her know that first, how horrified I was to see my state. My state, to see the numbers that we saw. And I think we were like in week 1 of our administration. And to say that, we are going to be very vocal and very aggressive partners in this. And it's the reason why literally as the sun came up the next morning, we had our statement ready to go that you shared. But letting Marylanders know that not only were we going to be a state that was going to be welcoming, a state where everyone is seen and heard, a state where everyone is protected, but also we are very clear to those who want to violate the civil rights and the independence of individuals there, that your actions will not be tolerated in our state. And so we want to be very clear on that.
Well, let's talk about what it means to kind of partner with ADL or other NGOs in this work. How do you envision that happening? What's the role of the state versus civil society in fighting this scourge?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I really love about having ADL as a partner in this is I think we understand that this is going to be a two-front battle that we're going to take on. One is that there are going to be ways that we have to zero in on increasing education, increasing exposure, and being very forthright about what type of state we are and how we are going to be a state that actually honors history and not ignores it. That we are going to be a state that actually lifts up our history and our foundation and understands that when we say things like never again, people have to understand, what do we mean by that? And what is it about that we're saying never again can happen again? And so this is about how can we reinforce education, and there's things that we're working on right now that I'd love to go into about things that we're doing to do that. Another thing that we're working on is being able to honor the past. So for example, in the state of Maryland, I signed a bill where January 27th in perpetuity, not just while I'm governor, in perpetuity, is now going to be Holocaust Remembrance Day. And because it's important for people to understand history and not to have that history blocked and not to have that history wiped off to the side as if it didn't happen. But I think there's a second piece where the partnering really matters too. Dr. King actually had a quote which I love, and he says, laws don't change the heart, but laws protect me from the heartless. Right? Laws don't change the heart, but laws can protect me from the heartless. And so we understand that this is also about laws. This is also about strengthening hate crime policy. And it's the reason why, for example, in our first days of office, we submitted a budget that now has become law, our budget, which increased hate crime prevention funding by $5 million in the state of Maryland. And going towards hardening of infrastructure. It's the reason that we put $122 million additional dollars into supporting for local law enforcement.
Amazing.
And so making sure that our homes of worship and our places can be safe and people can feel protected when they are going out and worshiping. It's the reason that we're passing laws in our first legislative session around things like anti-swatting, around things like actually creating a hardened commission that's going to focus on how are we looking at hate crimes as a whole. And so these are all things that we knew that it's going to be both a combination of how are we increasing education, but also how are we increasing and strengthening laws so that people can feel protected in their own communities.
So, you just touched on something, Governor Moore, that I want to reference, because we think a lot about fighting hate in the sanctuaries, the sacred spaces where we pray or where we worship. But for those who don't know, he is a veteran and he's a governor. He's also a husband and a father, 2 young kids, a little bit younger than mine. We were talking about this in the back about online harassment and about online hate, which we know is a problem. And you just alluded to this law, the Anti-Swatting Act, that makes it a crime, if you will, to make false statements.
Yes.
Talk to us a little about your views about online hate and harassment, both as, like, again, a governor and also maybe as a father, and what you guys plan on doing about it in Maryland.
You know, this is this is important and it's complicated.
Yeah.
Where, you know, I understand when people are talking about the importance of free speech and First Amendment. I completely understand the argument.
Yeah.
But when your free speech makes me and everyone else less safe, that's no longer free speech. That's very expensive and it's very deadly.
Yeah. Here.
And so while you know, people can make an argument, well, we're not bolstering, we're just simply giving platform. The challenge is that the data does not reinforce that argument. Because even being able to allow this type of language and hate to foment and grow and recruit, you are then by definition making individuals and making children less safe in their own personal environments. And so I do think that, we need to have a greater level of responsibility of the tools that we are unleashing on our society with a clear understanding of their consequences. We do need to have consequences when people misuse those tools. It's the same reason, frankly, where, again, you can believe in free speech, but there are certain things I can't yell fire in a movie theater.
Right.
So we essentially have these online tools that are creating platforms for people to scream verbal fire in movie theaters.
Yep.
So we have a collective responsibility as a state to say that we're not just simply going to hide behind the idea of everyone can say anything they want because it's just a reinforcement of First Amendment right. Not if what you are doing is literally making people less safe every single day. There is a responsibility that we have to lean into this. There's a responsibility that we have to move in partnership in it. But we cannot just allow this to grow and fester and say, well, it's just simply because we respect the First Amendment. I respect people's lives more.
Bravo. So, in full disclosure, I've known Governor Moore for maybe 15 years, and one of the things I've always loved about him is, like, I think about the work here, and we talk about fighting hate, but we've also got to build hope. You need a yin and a yang. You need a balance in order to win this war. And Wes, you always bring the hope. And we first met around the issue of service. It's after you wrote your first book. And you have been such a champion of this. Talk about the role of service as a strategy in Maryland, because you've got some exciting things you've already gotten done here, I think, pretty cool, and how you think about building hope more generally.
I remember when I was running Robin Hood, and we were working on a policy issue it was about child poverty with the child tax credit, adjustments to the child tax credit. And I remember we were trying to work with a former governor to try to get them to make the child tax credit permanent, because it's one of the most effective ways you can actually fight child poverty. And we worked with him for 6 months. I literally wrote the line in the State of the State that he could say. And when I got an advance copy of the State of the State, I saw there wasn't a single mention of the child tax credit nor child poverty inside that speech. So I was a little bit upset. I call up my head of public policy at Robin Hood, who's still there, but at the time, and I said, listen, and I'm going on this diatribe. And he said to me, listen, we worked for 6 months to try to get them to include a line in the speech. And he said, but what if you could write the whole speech? And that's the point. And 2 weeks after being inaugurated as the 63rd governor of Maryland, I gave the speech that I wanted to give.
Bravo.
And in that speech, the theme around it was, service will save us. Service will save us. And it goes back to the idea that we believe that if you can create a cohesive environment where people are working together, where people are learning from each other, that is the best and the fastest way for us to be able to address this massive divide that continues to pull us apart. And so it's one of the reasons why I was very proud. One of the first bills that we proposed 10 bills in this legislative session, went 10 for 10 for the bills we proposed. And by the way, got all 10 passed bipartisan, every single one of the bills. But one of the bills that we proposed and got passed is a bill called the SERVE Act. And what the SERVE Act does is Maryland is now the first state in this country that offers a service year option for our high school graduates, where our high school graduates can choose whatever area to serve in that they choose to if they opt to. Right?
What would be some examples of that?
So they can work in the environment. If it's, and we say we just want them to do whatever makes their heart beat a little bit faster. Right? So it can work on the environment. It can be early childhood. It can be reentry. They can work with veterans. They can work on combating hate crimes. Right? Whatever it is that they choose to do. And we're doing it for a few different reasons. One reason is I'm a big believer in experiential learning. Give young people a chance to learn what it is they want to do, and then give them the platform and the pathway for them to be able to do it. The second reason, this provides a measure of a financial cushion for every one of our students, because we know that oftentimes life gets in the way as students are thinking about making this transition. But the third reason, and the big reason, it's because service is sticky. Those who serve together generally stay together. And in this time of political divisiveness and vitriol, it is service that's going to save us. And I think about it in context where I remember when I was running for governor, I had people who I served with in Afghanistan who came and door knocked for my campaign. Many of them were not Marylanders. Many of them weren't Democrats.
Right.
But they came and campaigned on my behalf, and they were simply knocking on doors, and they were just saying, let me tell you about the guy that I served with. Service is sticky, and service will save us. And I think about this also where people say, well, it's such a novel idea and so different, this idea of serving and that helps to build up a sense of national cohesion and helping people to get to know each other. And I said, it's novel for a state to do it. And I believe that Maryland, not only is Maryland the first state, Maryland will not be the last, but do you know who's also done it before? Israel.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And other nations who understand the importance of service in helping to build a stronger civil society.
Yeah.
And I want Marylanders to serve, because when I say that this is going to be Maryland's decade, I mean that from the bottom of my heart. But the reason that I mean that, and the reason I know it's going to be true, is because we are going to make sure that there are 6.2 million fingerprints that are going to be on the future of our state.
So awesome. Guys, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, Governor Moore is the real deal. We are lucky to have him in our corner. I wish you, all of us wish you the best of luck in building the best state you can. Thank you so much.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double high or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, Post Office Box 360, Stamford, Connecticut 06904. Or you can call the JBS Pledge Line at 833-MY-JBS-TV. That's 833-695-2788. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. We thank you for your kind support.